Hey everyone. I don't know why my screen seems to be getting darker and darker, but it is. Um, Welcome to week 9. Um, Definitely the week before spring break, and as I promised last week, I am posting materials for this week, but I'm not asking you to turn anything in until the following Thursday. So you don't have to turn anything in during spring break. So, uh, and let's see, I am grading. I'm going to spend some time grading over spring break. I need to get your lit reviews back to you. Thanks everyone for reviewing your classmates, your group mates' work. I think that's good for everyone. It does help me, but I'll still review each one in its current form and get it back to you. So thanks for doing that. Also, I'm going to be reviewing everyone's overall activity on the activity grade for the course, about half the points. It's a nominal score. I'm looking for, did you turn in all the activities? Not all of which I'm giving you feedback on, but are you also engaged in the discussion threads? So I will be reviewing those. So stay tuned for that. So for this week, correlational research and causal comparative. Actually, two designs that I like. It's interesting. Let's see. The materials I'm sharing. One is an additional reading, and I came across it today just doing some research for the course, and it's actually a really interesting article. And this author is arguing that there's technically no real difference between correlational and causal comparative, and it actually gives you kind of the history of the design. So I've always liked causal comparative, but I do get this author's argument. Your book does, in fact, describe them as two different entities, and in the activity for this week, I'm asking you to engage in such a way that they are different. But I do want you to read this additional article arguing that they're really not different. So it was a good. I enjoyed reading the article and actually learned something from it. So I hope you enjoy that. The activity is pretty, once again, pretty practical, as I've probably suggested before. Those of you who are enjoying learning and don't mind grappling with the content, I suspect you're really enjoying these activities. If not, you're probably not enjoying them. But I do like making things hands-on. I do like giving you a feel for what it's like to be a researcher and to develop instruments, so and design studies. So it's not, the output is not a lot. It's only I'm asking for 1 page, but the processing it's going to require is going to it's going to take some thought. So that's why we're in graduate school. So once again, have fun with that. So briefly, correlational and causal comparative. Correlation it's interesting because correlation is the design you'll hear people say, the most. Correlation is not causation, and that is totally true. You can't infer that an independent variable has a direct cause on a dependent variable through correlational research. That needs to be experimental or quasi-experimental. So even if you just look at the image that I share on above this week's materials, I love this. It's in the book too, something like this. But just a graphical display of what is a positive correlation, and what is a negative correlation, and what is no correlation look like. I just love looking at things like this. in studies, because you can learn so much from it just from the regression line, basically, within the data points. And a fair amount of my research and evaluation work has been correlational, in looking at how well do early reading measures correlate or predict later reading measures. And some of the biggest work I've done is related to DIBELS, and how well does that predict what at the time of the research was MONTCAS. And I can say with great confidence that that DIBELS predicted the outcomes of MONTCAS in 3rd grade very well, actually. And some of you may love DIBELS, some of you may hate DIBELS, some of you may not even know what I'm talking about, but it's an early measure of reading. And I'm not sure if I ever shared this before, but one of my stats professor at Oregon was one of the main developers of DIBELS. So I've been familiar with it for a long time. I'm generally a supporter of what's called general outcome measures or curriculum-based measures. No particular loyalty to DIBELS, but I am generally supportive of that type of measurement and assessment. And what we know about that particular measure, or the particular measure of oral reading fluency, is that it is correlated with nearly every reading measure that you can come up with. That performance on oral reading fluency predicts, if you will, later reading outcomes. Every reading measure that I've ever seen correlated with it, it does that. Does that imply causation? No, it doesn't. DIBELS doesn't cause better reading outcomes on a later reading measure. However, it is related over and over and over to a high degree. So at some point, while you can't say it's causal, you can say there's a very strong relationship between oral reading fluency and later reading outcomes. That's my favorite example of correlation. Okay, another, other things that aren't logical. You probably have heard this probably in your text, actually, but that there's a correlation between the amount of ice cream eaten in a city and drownings. Okay, ice cream consumed and drownings. Well, why is that? The factor that would explain that would be the heat. It's warm outside, there's more people eating ice cream, there's more people swimming, therefore there's more drowning. So that's a correlation also, but it doesn't really make sense. They're unrelated ideas. Okay, so that's correlation. It's relatively basic, but it is essential to statistics. My advisor in Oregon loved to say really all statistics are correlational, and that's only sort of true, but many statistical analyses, when you get right down to it, you're ultimately talking about correlation. Okay, so as with causal comparative, make sure you're reading the text. So now causal comparative, I like the design because it's kind of the nature of some of my early research, and well, it is the design that's most conducive to my early research, but I never actually did a causal comparative study, although I did design a really nice one at one point, but have never been able to actually do the study. And actually that's what your activity is to give a brief description of what the outcomes are of kids who attend alternative school. So let's just think about, whatever. Let's just not talk about alternative schools, but let's talk about something like something local, International Baccalaureate. So you want to know, Does it really matter if kids attend an IB program or not? But you don't really have the funding to track kids for 5 years or whatever. But you do live in a place where hundreds of people have graduated from an IB program that's part of a high school. Okay, so you want to do a study and you want to say, you want to know, did the students who graduated from the IB program, have their outcomes in life been any different than the kids who graduated from the same high school but not the IB program? Or maybe you want to compare it to kids who didn't graduate high school at all. Okay, so you might have two different groups. You can have more groups that are just groups, right? They're not. It's just group A, B, or C. And this concept is what this author and the other reading is discussing, really. So you're looking at least two different groups of students, but you're collecting data after they've graduated. You're not like walking beside them, so to speak, and surveying them or giving them instruments to complete so you can learn about their outcomes or their state of mind or whatever it may be. But you're actually you're collecting data, so it might look something like you're contacting them by mail, asking them if you can survey them, and then gathering data from group A and group B, and then comparing, right, those outcomes. In a nutshell, that's what a causal comparative design looks like. So you can see how that could be hugely important, hugely useful for, I mean, that's one of a jajillion examples. I think jajillion's after a trillion, I'm not sure. But if you, just think through that. What are things that you would like to study in that way? There's so many examples. There's so many studies I'd love to do like that. So some differences there between correlational and causal comparative. Ironically, a couple weeks ago, I left I wasn't going to post the materials till later. I was just running late, and I left the experimental research. I had been working on that previously, and I forgot to hide it. So I left it open. Some people started doing that work, so that's why I was like, you know what, let's just go with that. And everyone did experimental. And interestingly, I've never had correlational and causal comparative grouped together in this course, and I think it's actually a really good grouping. So once again, enjoy the activity. Make sure you read both chapters related to correlational and causal comparative, and read that additional activity. Check out all the materials. May or may not have said, sorry, that I've posted examples of the proposal presentation that's coming up and an example of a proposal. Okay, one quick note on that. The proposal, it says in the syllabus, you just take your completed, an updated literature review table, and you put it into the proposal, right? So you don't have to write out a description what is a traditional literature review. I want you to focus on designing a study more than I want you to focus on writing out the literature review, which is a considerable amount of work and it's a great skill, but I don't want you to have to focus on that. So you're taking the table, putting it in there, writing an introduction, etc., writing out your research questions, and then writing out a study, explaining how you would do the study. So people are all like, how long should it be? It really, once you put your table in, that's going to take up probably 5 pages. So you're talking somewhere between 10 would be a short one, I would say, but probably closer to 15 pages. I'm not counting pages when I review these. I'm looking for a well thought out study that makes sense relative to your research questions. So make sure you read the syllabus, and we still have some time. We're going to loop back around to that, but I just wanted to share that with you early in the course. So I think that's it. I hope everyone has a nice spring break. If you have it from work or just from school, do something fun. I'm going to try to check out and mainly focus on grading, but I'm always checking email. So if something comes up, just let me know. So take care, everyone.